Another day. We thank you once again that we, your people, can come before you and ask for guidance for the men and women of this assembly. Bless the citizens of our nation with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Please keep all who work in this chamber in good health, that may faithfully fulfill the great responsibility given them in their work as service as parliamentarians and staff. May all that is done here this day be for your honor and greater glory, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, August 10th, 2021 to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Petitions, papers.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the annual report of the Financial Services Commission for the financial year 2017-2018 and 2018 to 2019, as well as 2019 to 2020.
Government notices, private members notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the final appropriation bill 2019-2020 and the first reading of the final appropriation bill for 2020-2021.
Second that, sir.
The question is that the aforementioned bills be read the first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and there's not one yet. Congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Questions that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 2, in the name of the Honorable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, divesting in the Barbados Tourism Investment, Inc., a company incorporated on the Companies Act, Cap 308, of a parcel of land, the property of the Crown, comprising the former Her Majesty's Prison, Glenderry, together with the buildings thereon, situate at Station Hill in the parish of St. Michael in this island, for the public purpose of tourism development.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Mr. Speaker, clearly this is a fine and interesting opportunity for me because it gives me an opportunity to speak for one who cannot really speak in this chamber. And of course, the former prison at Glenderry falls squarely within the constituency represented by the Speaker of this Honourable House. And I will try to do justice and try to give the best representation I can, as I know he would if our roles were exchanged and it related to something in Christchurch West. Mr. Speaker, let me first start by saying when I first came to the Ministry of Housing, we took on a project of rejuvenating buildings that had been disused or misused or unused for a very long time. We started with the Supreme Court, and that rejuvenation project is continuing and moving at a pace. And let me congratulate not only the Ministry of Housing, but also the architects, the engineers, and all of the workmen associated with that project. We're very pleased at the progress of the project. Yes, it has experienced some scope creep, but it continues to progress at a pace. From there, we went on to the Sanitation Service Authority building. And that currently houses the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology. And that came in on time and on budget, and we were very happy with that. From there, we went on to the gatehouse at the old Barbados Water Authority site. And that also came in very quickly on time and on budget, and we were happy with that. Then we went on to the welfare building. And that welfare building, I actually can see it out of my office, and it is moving at a pace. And I expect that that will be completed. I would imagine the contractor says 6 months. I said 4. So we're settling on 5. And I hope that that will be completed there. All of those were essentially funded by central government. But not to be undone or not to give the private sector an opportunity, we then went to the Louis Lynch building, the former Louis Lynch school, Roebuck Secondary as I remember it, and we had an opportunity for the private sector to get involved with rejuvenation and bringing new buildings and giving them new life. And we seized that opportunity, brought that matter to the Honourable House. That has now gone through both houses, just waiting, I believe, for the assent of the Governor General, if that is required. And I am happy that that is progressing well. So you'll see, Mr. Speaker, all through we have done central government doing buildings, private sector doing buildings. This is the first, and I want to call it another type of rejuvenation, that we are encouraging members of the community to get involved and come and repurpose this facility. I see this facility, and the reason why we want to vest this in the BTII is they have significant knowledge and experience in rejuvenating these types of areas for community use. They did the beer garden, and you could only just pass through the beer garden on a Friday night and see the amount of people there and the benefits that improvement of that area has brought to that community. And it has been a tremendous upliftment. Indeed, I know you wouldn't scold me for mentioning a name, but there is a friend of mine there who they call Uncle George of Fishnet Grill. And he is very popular even on TripAdvisor, Mr. Speaker. In fact, his wife is a childhood friend of mine from Dayton Road, Cynthia. And I visit there regularly, and Chicken George is a great friend and a tremendous national asset to the country and that community. And I see the former Glenderry prison as that kind of community empowerment, an opportunity for people of the community to come and get involved with making this a whole community project of giving opportunities for kiosks, giving opportunities for people to come and sell their wares, fish fry, that kind of thing. And at the same time, be able to see what was once an institution that goes back to 1840, I think it was. A building that stood the test of time, that saw many a hurricane, many a high wind, and still was able to stand up. Indeed, the architecture and the engineering of that time, maybe, I think to some extent, modern engineers and modern architects have significant still to learn from that. We only have to look at the NAS building that we had to take down, which was first built in 1971. So it was erected and was taken down in the same century that it was erected. In fact, the same 50 years, as opposed to this building that was erected, I believe, in the 1830s, and it still stands today. We're all aware, Mr. Speaker, of the fire that took place. And even although it caused the decommissioning of the whole prison and the building of a new prison, it only damaged about 8% of the buildings. The vast majority of the buildings remain. So clearly there is an opportunity there. Right now it's being used to house cars by the Royal Barbados Police Force, those for evidence and so on. And sadly, I've been informed that we are actually experiencing people breaking into Glenderry Prison to get pieces off those cars, rather than in the past breaking out of Glenderry Prison to get out and into the environment. And when I think of breaking out of Glenderry Prison, if you would allow me a short story as I recall my one personal experience of Glenderry Prison. It has nothing to do with breaking in and breaking, well, it has to do with breaking out to some extent. And I'll explain to you why. When I was a young person about to get involved in politics, I met a man who would be well known to people of my age group called Eric Seeley. And I'm sure that you would know Eric Seeley as well. In fact, he was from the constituency of Christchurch West. I asked the speaker's permission as no, but you would know who I refer to. And Mr. Seeley came to me and said, young man, I heard that you're interested in getting involved in politics. And I would like you to make a donation to Glenderry Prison. He said that he had solicited somebody to make a donation of a TV. But what they needed with the TV is a VCR DVD thing. I know young people might not remember what VCR is, because that is something you don't see these days, a videotape recorder. And I fully agreed, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as I was then. And I got the DVD, the VCR, and so on, and I proceeded to go to Glenderry Prison with Mr. Eric Seeley. And I made the presentation. Of course, he'd arranged the press and all this sort of thing. First time I had been in the press doing this kind of thing, and I was impressed with it. But more importantly than that, the then superintendent, I can see him now, 6'4", almost 300-pound gentleman, huge, imposing figure, gave me a tour of the facility while I was there. And he showed me the remand section. He showed me the gallows where many people had lost their lives. He even showed me the place where Winston Hall, the infamous Mr. Hall, was held while he was there in that facility. And he showed me, in fact, they had made a block making device. And they made their own blocks and built other wings of the prison as they went forward. And I was totally impressed, and it made an indelible mark on me, absolutely and for sure. And it is something a memory that I will always retain. And it brings together the point, Mr. Speaker, that if only those walls could talk, the thousands of stories that those walls could give, the stories of horror, the stories of heartbreak, the difficulties that people who were housed in those walls would have gone through, literally over the centuries, is certainly a part of our history that is important and really should not be left to just languish unused and just become a haven for rodents and debushing and all sorts of other activities that we wouldn't want to mention. So I think that this opportunity to revive this facility, to bring it back into productive use, to give community people an opportunity to get involved in it by first vesting it in the BTIA and then opening up to the community so that all members can become a part. Could you imagine, Mr. Speaker, an opportunity to visit Glenderry Prison and get some fish fried by one of the local people, fish and chips, or I tend to go for salmon and salad, but that kind of thing. Listen to little music, maybe see or hear a presentation, something like that. I don't know what will be the winning bid. I don't know how the BTIA will develop it, but certainly there's a myriad of opportunities at that facility and ways that facility can be redeveloped. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me to speak of that facility and not speak of the surrounding areas. And I must tell you, before, and it hasn't come to this Parliament yet, but it is very much out there in the community in terms of the rezoning of that area. And I believe that area used to be a Zone 1 area, but under the new zoning, when it does come to this Parliament, I know I'm not really allowed to speak to what has not come to Parliament before, but it's certainly out there and is being assessed and addressed. I understand that that area will no longer be a Zone 1 area, and then development would be permissible in that area. And that would redound not only to the benefit of those at Glenderry Prison, but also to all of those in the surrounding community, and make a significant benefit to all of them. And that then brings us to the next question, and it is, of course, very dear to your heart, Mr. Speaker, and that would be the people of Bellevue and what their status would be. Firstly, zoning would have an impact on that for sure. And then secondly, I must tell this Honourable House that clearly both at Bellevue and the Bell and all of the work that is to be done out there to put those people without title in a right frame is being worked on and is being given greatest attention. And I don't know if the member for St. John will speak and give all of the full details on that matter. But that is certainly gaining the attention of the Cabinet and the people and the government of Barbados for sure. In fact, the Prime Minister has reiterated that it must be given an absolute priority for both of those locations. So, Mr. Speaker, all that is left is for me to commend this resolution to this Parliament and ask that all members here join with me in giving that full and complete support to bring these buildings back into full and complete use, and to join in that vision as seeing this as a fantastic community project for all the people of Barbados to enjoy. With those few words, may I ask that this resolution do not pass.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to commend this resolution to this House, and I do feel compelled to speak to this matter for several reasons, not least among which are the fact that the Barbados Tourism Investment Inc. is a part of the Ministry of Investment and is currently involved not just in what would traditionally be considered the tourism belt, but across Barbados in several initiatives to expand what we would normally consider to be investment and investment opportunities for the people of Barbados. I've made reference on earlier occasions as well to the approach that we are taking to repurposing assets, repurposing lands and properties of the government of Barbados, such that we can do several things at once, such that we can do what the request for proposals that has been prepared with respect to the site in anticipation of this vesting being passed, that the request for proposals makes reference to. And I just want to give this House an idea of some of the thinking. The honourable member who introduced the resolution made reference to some of it. And I think that it signals a new approach. And what is that new approach? You know, one of the reasons that I felt compelled to come to political service has to do with what I think is the continuation of the process of nation building and independence for Barbados and Barbadians. And we always talked about Barbadians being able to own a piece of the rock. And that has been and continues to be important, and I will come to that subsequently. But I coming from where I come from, having had the experience that I've had where my parents fought hard for a piece of the rock, but a piece of the rock is not enough. And what we've said is that Barbadians must also have a piece of the action. We have a challenge in Barbados with what I call an absence of intergenerational prosperity. And so what happens? Opportunities may be created for one generation, or opportunities may be created for a person in a particular generation. And regrettably, that opportunity for education, or that opportunity for a higher income than their parents made, regrettably, that is not enough. And why is that? It's not enough because of something that fancy social scientists like the member from St. Michael South would call dependency ratios. Dependency ratio in a household is just about how many people, how many interests, how many things have a claim on my income. And so I may be responsible for looking after my parents in their retirement. I may be responsible for looking after my siblings who may not have had the same opportunity that I did. And I may be responsible for looking after people in the community, which many people do. And so the challenge that is in front of us, and I don't want us to think that the question of governing our own affairs through the transition to becoming a republic is the only business of completing the independence project. That is a part of it. It is an important part of it. But there are many other areas that will mean or will tell us that that process is complete or is progressing. And it is the fact that we have to solve, Mr. Speaker, these are the things that keep me up at night. We have to solve this business of creating intergenerational wealth for Barbadians. We have something called the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And why is that? Because the business of health is not just about the absence of disease. It is about wellness and prosperity. And similarly, the business of economic justice is not just about the absence of poverty. It is about prosperity. And if all we do is make sure that people have a meal, I'm sorry, it's not enough. And we, as a Ministry of Investment, we as a government of Barbados, have made it clear that our task is to create investment opportunities and to create assets that can pass from generation to generation, to create opportunities for entrepreneurship. And I don't mind saying that BTA, in collaboration with the ministry that's responsible for youth and for the Building Blocks project, is also in my own constituency working on introducing commercial activity to the Halls Road area so that people are not just working for somebody, but people get a choice in terms of determining the kind of entrepreneurial activity that they want to get involved in. And so this what is intended for this Glenderry project is not just to develop heritage tourism. There are people who, I'm told, who travel the world visiting former prisons. Now, I can find better things to do with my vacation. That's my choice. I like to travel and hike and climb mountains and look at the view. To each their own. And so I'm told that there are people who travel and visit former prisons. I have a good friend who worked on a music program, entertainment program with the prison when it was still at that location. And who, through his work with those who lived in that place, who were staying in that place, who had cause to be there, but came to develop all kinds of understandings of how people lived in earlier years and how the men that he worked with lived then. And he would always say to me, we have to do something with this location, because doing something with this location is actually honoring the lives of people who pass through here. And he said to me, we see these places as places to just hold people and keep people away from us. But people live their lives here. And people have all kinds of experiences here. And as the honorable member before me said, there are stories to be told here, and some of are unpleasant stories, and some are uncomfortable stories, and some of those stories include the stories of people who may not have been incarcerated at that location, but people who lived in the area, people who worked in the area, people who went to school off salaries earned by their parents who worked at that institution. And so there are lots of stories to be told there. And there is a heritage tourism product there. But there's also an opportunity for investment there. And by opening this up and giving people like my friend who may want to be a part of an arts program that is made available to people in the community and may want to respond to the RFP to make that happen. People who live in the area who may want to be a part of the commercial development of the mixed-use entity or the mixed-use going concern that is established there. But what we will also seek to do is to make sure that there is the incorporation of green technology, of renewable energy, of all of these things that are important in making sure not just that if people in the area do come in to invest, that they're also able to reduce their overheads. They're also able to operate in a way that is efficient. And so these are the kinds of things that are contemplated there. Now, I'm hoping, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this week I will have some meetings with some of the credit unions, because I mean what I say when I indicate to you that we have to be able to settle the investment instruments that will allow Barbadians to invest in the things that matter to them and the things that they're interested in. And to its credit, sorry for the terrible pun, the credit union movement has been reaching out to us and saying, we are liquid, but beyond that, because the banks are liquid too, but beyond that, we have an interest. We are a movement that has come from the ground up. And we don't forget where we're coming from and in whose name we do this work. And so we have to make use of the credit union movement, and we intend to, in order to create some of these vehicles through which Barbadians can invest and have it be something real, and have it be not just an idea, but that we can have families, generations that are prosperous for generations to come, because we have facilitated instruments set up through the credit union, and we hope that the banks come on board, set up through the credit union and other financial entities that give people a way to invest their savings in something that will be productive for years to come. Mr. Speaker, I want to go further on something that was also introduced by the member who spoke before me. And it has to do with what I call the balance of development. We, regrettably, and when I say we, I mean in the popular discourse, we seem to have this habit, and it's a fallacy, of if I come and say, I want to cook some rice, somebody will jump up and say, but what about macaroni? It's called the what if fallacy, the what about fallacy. And I want to emphasize that because we are seeking to make an investment in one place or facilitate an investment in one place, it does not mean that we are doing nothing else anywhere. I want to repeat myself. We have to be able to walk and chew gum. We have to be able to have several balls in the air and not let them fall on our heads. That is what governance is. And so, because we are creating an opportunity for the development of Glenderry site, it doesn't mean that, as the member for Christchurch West indicated, that we are not also simultaneously addressing the very vexing issue, nobody can disagree, and sir, I know certainly you will not, of the issue of access to decent, dignified, affordable housing in these communities. It is the reason that the public sector investment program, for which I also have some responsibility, is a prioritized program. It isn't just a list of things the government is doing. It is a prioritized program which says to the people of Barbados, this is what you have said to us matters most for development and what we are choosing to prioritize. At the top of the public sector investment program, I look at it every day, sir, is the sewering of the Bell and Chapman Lane and all of the areas in that urban corridor that have the challenge of access to sanitation that has then created the challenge of access to decent housing. We have to be able to solve that issue first. And in the new zoning areas, water zoning areas, that area now becomes, and I hate to preempt the members who will introduce this, but then that area then becomes an area where development can take place and where we can make sure that there is adequate sanitation, but that it will allow for residential activity, commercial activity, and so on, because that has always been the challenge there. Now, as I always say, this government has several tools in its belt. So it's not just that we've prioritized and have started the work, and I'm sure others will speak to where we are with that, to provide decent sanitation, because we have to start there. And I want us to understand, I've said it in this place before, that we have to provide pathways for people to live with dignity. I would prefer to provide the way for people to live with dignity than to justify the fact that they don't. And I'll tell you what I mean. I could not in good conscience, and I cannot in my own constituency, in good conscience, look the other way while people live in ways that I would not want to live. I mean, let's be real. It is politically expedient for some to say, man, lefty people, well, they must be happy. They can't be happy, sir. They are doing, and they are living in ways, and they have come with next best solutions to something. They want to and prefer to live the way everybody else does. And the role of the government is to facilitate access to those services that will allow them to do that. I am sorry, but I don't plan to look the other way in St. Michael South Central, when people are living in ways that I or you, sir, would not want to live. I believe in choice, it is true. As a development economist, I believe in choice. But what we see happening is the result of an absence of choice. And what we have a responsibility to do is to give people the choice, the opportunity to live in a dignified way. And so through the public sector investment program and the sewering of these areas and making sure, these are not easy solutions, because we have some situations where, and we visited with the engineers and we've visited with the agencies of government, and we do have some situations where in some cases we can't put a big sewage treatment plant, we can't make certain kinds of connections because of the topography, but we are going to make sure that we find these solutions and we implement these solutions, and others will speak to them, that allow people to have access to sanitation, but also allow us to protect the environment for all Barbadians, because I don't want us to believe that that is not also a responsibility of government. To be able to protect the water supply, to be able to make sure that we do not undertake these things in ways that put all of us at risk. Finally, sir, I want to just say something very quickly about the tools that we use. Now, we have been working in the Town Planning Department with the support of the Office of the Attorney General on a different approach to planning, a different approach to development. And I know members must be tired of hearing me say this, but sometimes things bear repeating. Our philosophy is that if you have a major development that puts a strain on the public resources and draws on the patrimony of this country, access to the environment, access to the natural assets of this country, and it is a major development that, let's face it, large developments are a draw on public resources. And we want developments to happen. We want developments that create decent work for people. But we also have to be aware that there is a balance of development. So that we discuss with developers the fact that if you are bringing taking up a major footprint in a land with in a country with scarce resources, we also want to be able to compensate for that cost to the environment by putting something back for the interests of Barbadians. And that's what we mean when we talk about planning obligations. So that we have been able to settle, in the cases of several large developments, planning obligations agreements where we have access to land that we receive in order to give something back to the country. And in several cases, actually in every case so far, that something has been access to land for affordable housing. I am aware that the member for Christchurch West, in his capacity as minister responsible for housing, has been at pains, I'm sure this is what keeps him up at night, to run as fast as he can and run as fast as a ministry can to convert this affordable, this land to houses for people who are living either in overcrowded situations or living in the kinds of informal settlements that don't allow them to live comfortably. And so, as I close, sir, I want to emphasize something. That I just left the kickoff meeting a few minutes ago with the International Monetary Fund for a mission that is going on all this week. And in those conversations that we have with the fund, we talk, you see, there are people who believe that we just looking at macro issues. We talk about every single issue that affects the development of this country. Because while we have a responsibility to give people access to basic goods and services, we also have a responsibility to contribute to a thriving economy, which can also then provide decent work for those same people. There are those who would like to suggest that it is a zero-sum game. It is not. All of these things need to be done. We need a balance of responsible, inclusive investment, which is where our credit unions come in and all these new instruments come in. And we need to be able to generate the growth and the prosperity that will allow us to provide to people. I always tell people, I used to teach this in my classes. When I had the privilege to teach development economics courses, economics is not about numbers, it's about the provisioning of goods and services to people. But in order to do that provisioning, you need the wherewithal to do it. You need the resources to do it. So I encourage us to see efforts such as this as being about a balance of development, of being about a balance of creating opportunities for Barbadians, for prosperity in all areas of their lives. And with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honorable Leader, Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just to make a brief contribution to debate in the matter before us. May I say, I thank the last honorable member who spoke for her presentation. May I acknowledge that I'm always very impressed with the sense of seeming earnestness with which she presents on these matters in this House. The seeming clarity of vision that drives her contributions. I consider them often to be very substantive, don't always necessarily agree, but I am appreciative of the fact that she represents what she understands to be government's policy vision on these very important matters in the way that she does, and I'm appreciative of that. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to speak in this. I have spent, I've said this, I've admitted this to a number of people. I spent much time at Glenderry. And I spent some time around Glenderry. Sorry? I spent much time at Glenderry and in Glenderry. I also grew up in Station Hill, as you would know. And as an institution, Glenderry Prison and its precincts were prominent in the eyes and the minds, the attention, the interests of youngsters growing up around there. We've seen all kinds of things happen there. Some good, some not so good. And so every time I pass near there now, especially going down or up Bridge Road, one can see from even that distance trees growing through the roof, not growing on the compound, but growing through the roof of the building, growing on the roof of the abandoned buildings. And one is always possessed of a sense of the waste that seems to be taking place there. These are buildings long built, long established, some way back from 1850s. We know the purpose for which the property was principally used, and much of what the last member who spoke said perhaps goes unrecognized by many of us, the many who made their living there, the many who contributed to life course corrections to the life of others there, those who spent much of their lives there, those who found themselves as frequent visitors there, and those who made their legends out of activities in which they engaged while there. The story is a legend. So it is an institution of some importance to which I believe attention must be paid. For it to have become a haven for vermin, a haven for rodents, is regrettable. The prison was decommissioned in 2016, I think it was. We stopped its principal use in 2005-06 when there was the fire. And the place has become, and I've said this before, in my view, potentially a health hazard for those who live in surrounding communities Station Hill and Dean's Village. Your constituency and my pastoral community as well. I heard the Honorable Member for Christchurch West, Minister of Housing, speak with reference to the fact that he understands that there are those who now attempt to break in rather than break out and give themselves access to vehicles and vehicle parts which are stored there and other stuff which may be on the compound. I've also heard that. I have heard, Mr. Speaker, and I will not go further than to say this, it is not just the incidental and infrequent intrusion of somebody looking for a specific part, but part of an organized racket that allows persons to get into the compound and have access to whatever is considered to be of value. But you're the MP, that is for you to investigate. And the Honorable Member for Christchurch East is the minister responsible. That is for him to investigate. But certainly we cannot continue to have this compound be a haven for vermin and for rodents and for other types of activity. It has been suggested, and the Honorable Member who last spoke made reference to its use for tourism, heritage tourism purposes. Specifically, it has been suggested by people of prominent note in Barbados that this former prison institution could become a prison museum. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. There are prison museums that attract a lot of interest and generate a lot of revenue because of that. But such prison facilities have to have the great characteristic and value of location. And I do not know that necessarily Station Hill makes it onto the register of people's interests around the world. Registers as a place of prominence on anybody's map in the world. So location is not necessarily going to be a particular or specific that attracts people's interest. Of course, prison museums carry interest for those who have such interest because of the sometimes legends surrounding those who have populated against their will those places. I don't know that we can boast of many of those, but the Brathwaite is known perhaps not even to most in here, maybe known to the Honourable Member of St. George North, maybe known to a few of us who have a certain age, maybe known to you as a legal luminary, but he was the stuff of which legends are made when I was a young boy in Barbados. Winston Hall is of more recent vintage, and perhaps his accomplishments, quote unquote, Mr. Speaker, may be known to most here, but I don't know that beyond the borders of our country, beyond one to the islands of the Caribbean, to which he made recourse during his free time, that he is the stuff that would attract the interest of people beyond that. You know, there are others, names which are known, but not known widely enough. We've had the international presence of a fellow called Ron Biggs, here for a little while, but he is representative of an era long past behind us, and I don't even know that he would occupy much of the interest in the minds of Barbados. To be used as a heritage site, a tourism heritage site, to be used as a prison museum, I don't know necessarily that we will get very far in terms of generating loads of income or revenue out of that. So I'll be suggested, Mr. Speaker, that it could be used as a crop over venue. I would want to join my voice with yours, because I am sure if yours could be heard, you would say that if you talk about a crop over venue, you are not going to repeat some of the errors which have been made in terms of some of the activities some of the activities which have been allowed to take place at the National Stadium during crop over time, to the displeasure of many in Waterford and in Bashall and in Bank Hall and in Station Hill because of the negative impact of loud noise. There may be several who have no problem with it. There may be several who appreciate it. But if you're talking about using the old prison site as a crop over venue, I hope you're not talking about bringing activities associated with loud sounding noises to disturb the good people of Dean's Village and Station Hill and Hinesbury Road. I'm sure if you could speak in here, Mr. Speaker, that is what you would say. So I join with you in making that appeal and suggesting that we don't go there. Certainly, it could be a site for craft and cultural enterprises and other activities of a less intrusive and less impactful with respect to noise character. If that is the case, I support that. It's a big space. I do not know the exact acreage there, but it is a large space. And if it can be used for craft-related and other softer cultural-related activities, enterprises, I would be of the view that that is something that we can countenance, but certainly not a venue for loud noise and some of the other activity that goes along with that. I suggested previously, since the government is seeking to develop the botanical gardens at Waterford and at the Bell and parts of Station Hill, a task which was earlier committed to my honorable colleague and friend and my honorable representative here, Sir Michael East, who sits very closely here with me and to my immediate left, and he does so with pleasure. This was a task begun by him, and I commend him for the start which was made. Sometimes in traversing the area, I seem to get the impression that it is a stalled project, and that all that happens is that occasionally when the grass gets a bit tall and the bush presents itself again to the view of the public, persons are given the opportunity to come in and clean it and clear it and cut some grass. I don't know that the project is stalled. I'm simply saying that since the departure of my friend, the unexpected departure of my honorable friend here, that it seems to have stalled. I'm sure he has still sustained interest in the project, and I would urge him, notwithstanding his new responsibilities, that if he finds it possible, he could perhaps think in terms of giving again some of those energies to the undertaking there at the Bell, at Waterford, and at the Bell, and at Station Hill, because it could be, as I have suggested earlier in this very place, that we may find use for the former prison facility as part of the whole exercise of developing a botanical gardens space, because the gully at Station Hill behind the prison connects immediately so with the area of the botanical gardens. You would not know this, Mr. Speaker, or perhaps you do. I ran all through there as a boy, did some of the things, the good things that young boys did, and did what were the bad or not so good things that young boys did in the prison gully, in the Waterford plantation. I've asked for forgiveness. But nothing more serious, Mr. Speaker, than going to Waterford and breaking cane. Nothing more sinister or serious than that. Not the type of activity that my honorable friend over here has in mind, and would himself be induced to enter into. That was not me. So I found easy forgiveness for that which I did, because it was the young, playful things of fellows learning life. And that was all. There are several other possible uses. we often seek to generate revenue through government policy, creating of institutions. Often we fail to see the other side of the coin, that we can save much of what we now expend in trying to address problems from the back end rather than the front end. Glenderry Prison Facility was originally built, Mr. Speaker, just to house 75 people. And then there were further buildings added later that created an accommodation capacity of about 300 people. But there was a point at which we were accommodating about 1,000 or just beyond at Glenderry, so that you had 3 and 4 people in a very small cell originally constructed for one person. And Mr. Speaker, into that one prison facility, we put the good, the bad, and the ugly. And by dint of that practice, we criminalize people who otherwise perhaps we could have helped to avoid that process of criminalization. You practice in the law courts. You see these things clearly face to face from close up every day. And you would know, because you've been long in that practice, that there are many who perhaps we could have saved from a life of further crime if we had the institutional mechanisms in place to give to them, to afford to them the possible course corrections which would have been needed. So here's an opportunity perhaps to use the space for a halfway house. Right now, if you take, for instance, the drug rehab program in Barbados, apart from the 1 or 2 private or quasi-private facility institutions, organizations which are operating sometimes with a little help from government, I think we have a psychiatric ward at the QEH. I think we used to have a still do, and I think some people who have drug-related issues find themselves there. Down at the mental hospital, which is associated principally with mental illness, Mr. Speaker, when you go down there, you're mad. That's what people say. You're seen to be mad. But you have people down there who have become addicted to drugs, and there is part of the facility within the compound of the mental hospital where we treat to that. And I think we're adding to the stigmatization of those persons. And we need to be able to see it possible as a country moving forward to put investment into areas that can help us to correct some of these things that we have not been getting right, that we've been getting wrong. So a guy who is addicted to use of drugs, subjected to the abuse, can't help himself or can't help herself, does not end up there. And you're down Black Rock, you're in the psychiatric hospital, you're perceived to be a totally mentally deranged person. When in fact we could provide a facility that can treat specifically to that. And I believe these are areas in which government and social organizations can join hand in hand. Some of them faith-rooted and faith-related organizations can join with the state hand in hand in helping to reverse some of the negatives associated with practices that we have long pursued in Barbados with good intentions, but not necessarily showing up the best results for us. A young offenders institution, I alluded to the fact that we put the good and the bad and the ugly at Glenderry, and we don't have a young offenders institution. Do not know if there is, with the expanded arrangements at Dodge with the new prison. If there is, you would be better informed on this, I think, Mr. Speaker, than I am, as to whether or not there is that separated facility where first-time offenders, young offenders are housed and kept away from a mature criminalized population, because there's where the process of degeneration will take place in their thinking. And if you're housed together with the fellas who are rough, man, and you're there for a while, you learn to rough it, I imagine, and then you come out a different product from when you went in. A young offenders institution is needed, in my view, in Barbados. That has long been mooted. We are struggling with the facilities for the girls' industrial school and the young male facility, Dodds. And here is a space perhaps that we can use to build a type of facility that would allow for proper treatment of the behavior exhibited by those who are young, inexperienced, a bit unpurposed in life at the time, perhaps ill-advised in their actions, fall afoul of the law, but we can still have them redeemed if we have the institutional infrastructure in place. Consideration could also be given to a site for relief housing in Barbados. And I heard and understood what the other minister said, who last spoke about walking and chewing gum at the same time. And that is true. And I know that government is making other arrangements to treat the problem of lack of housing in Barbados. But the horse is so far bolted out of the stable, it's going to take a tremendous energy, a lot of time to catch up. But relief housing, in the instance where there are fires or impact upon people's housing of events of nature, of the natural kind, we still don't have that relief housing available to us in Barbados, and people who are faced with misfortune sometimes have to struggle to find alternative accommodation. Here's a space where perhaps a specific, deliberate project can be undertaken to provide for temporary and relief housing to those who may need that from time to time. A rehabilitation center with a strong skills development component. This is a site which is big enough, spacious enough, that can be used for something like that as well. Now, the rehabilitation program, which is ongoing among those who are incarcerated in Barbados, has been the subject of question over many years. There have been stories of good outcomes, and we have seen evidence of people who, having gone to prison at Glenderry, who have put whatever exposure they've had to rehabilitation and skills development to good use. But I think that that is a story which needs to be heard in far more exaggerated terms than is now the case. In other words, it cannot be that it is one or two. It cannot be that it is the exception and we are satisfied with that. We need to have a deliberate policy and program geared to ensuring that rehab is a strong and mandatory component. I know that word mandatory is a bad word these days, but a strong and mandatory component of any period of confinement, especially at that youth level among young offenders. And that facility allows for the building of such. So what are we talking about? The building was built for a specific purpose, and if used for any of these purposes I'm outlining, probably would have to be demolished, redesigned, and all of that. But the space is there. I believe the initiatives are necessary, worthwhile in terms of our development. These things over time will save us the costs we are now spending, because when we criminalize a youngster, we have to put him in Glenderry, we're spending, it used to be what, $35,000 a year to keep one fella there. Well, you know the prices of everything going up all around the place now, and the prison is providing less for itself anyhow. So the costs would have escalated over time. And that $35,000 of 10, 12, 15 years ago is now increased by X amount. We have to spend that for every guy we put there on a yearly basis. And that is money that can be saved if we can stop that guy from going there and redeem him from a life of criminal habit. And I'm saying here's an opportunity to consider that whereas with heritage tourism, you can possibly, I don't know, I don't buy it myself, possibly make a lot of money out of it. If you go the other direction, perhaps you can save a lot of money and in that way earn revenue, if you catch my drift. I have called for as well the setting up in Barbados of a few centers to treat to the business of auto repairs. Mr. Speaker, you represent St. Michael Central, you see it. I represent St. Michael West, I see it. My honorable friend to my left represents St. Michael East. My two friends behind me represent St. Philip West and St. Philip North. I'm not sure where the others represent. The point I'm making here is we have, in many of these contexts in urban Barbados, people who are making an honest effort every day to earn a living by treating to auto repairs, whether it is mechanical or electrical, whether it is other cosmetic aspects of vehicle repair. They don't have the space. They do not have the space. So what you find is in the avenues of Peterkin, people have cars parked left, right, and center in the road because that's the only place they've got to treat to these vehicles. Sometimes situation is such that repairs can't be done and the vehicle is left and abandoned, quote unquote, on the very spot. You have a major problem, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you know, I hope you know, in Dean's Village, where, my goodness, and I'm not castigating the person or persons responsible, but that is a health hazard, and that is a big problem. Scores and scores of old vehicle parts. I've seen some of them even on rooftops. Have you seen that, Mr. Speaker? You've been there recently?
On top houses, sir.
On top houses. So you've been there recently.
Amazing that Hurricane Accident blew them off.
I said I had the same thought myself recently. So you have been there recent months. And
I'm always there, sir.
always there. All right. I commend you for that. I commend you for that. But that is a problem which is developing out of a legitimate and honest effort to earn a living. It is not the space. I said the government perhaps can create some auto parks, auto repair parks. I think it's in the Barbados Labour Party manifesto. It didn't get there by accident. I happen to know some of the things that are in that manifesto. I happen to know about some of the things that are in that manifesto. And there are those in this chamber who will tell you, he knows that it is there, but they will not tell you how it got there. They will not tell you how it got there, Mr. Speaker. But here is a site that perhaps could be considered for that type of activity. So you take some of this thing. If you have a fire, as we have had in Peterkin, you got problems. The fire service can't get in there. You know what I'm talking about. This particular avenue in Dean's Village, you can barely drive through there. And it has developed right next to where was a supermarket previously, food distribution, food retail. It's unsightly, and perhaps it comes out of the necessity that people feel to develop their own spaces when there's no access. So I'm not castigating those people. I'm simply saying we got to look for these opportunities, and the government use these opportunities to help to develop enterprise. There are ways of generating revenue by what you do, new things that you open. There are also ways of saving expense by what you do. And I just, in this instance, offer one or two of these suggestions. I've said some of them before. I don't think that they bear repeating today. I thank you.
I remember saying Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Long time since I said a few words in here, but I will attempt to say some now. Just a few random thoughts, almost random, running through my head with respect to the resolution. First of all, I think the honourable member for Christchurch West is genius to bring the resolution here, but I must admit that now I'm hearing the honourable member for the leader for the opposition offering other alternatives for the prisons. I can't help but agree with some of them. Yes, heritage sites. I like the idea that these are being developed. I love them, and I think the prisons, although we don't have too much of a worldwide history, is one of the ways to start or to continue. I remember way back when I was a child, hangings That was an interesting aspect of the history of Glenderry, as well as, of course, Winston Hall. There are books written on Winston Hall now. So it does have a place with respect to heritage tourism. One thing that COVID has given us is the opportunity to delve into areas and to develop areas that are not directly related to COVID. These, of course, being women's issues, abuse of women, child care and protection, agriculture, to name many, but heritage tourism, of course, remains fairly high on that list, and the development of the heritage product, finding sites and developing such sites to add to the tourism product, because the truth is we have to start thinking differently with respect to tourism. Successive governments, I must admit, governments, plural, have had a habit of basically allowing buildings to deteriorate, then abandoning them, then building them back, and everything is forgotten about the previous building. And I think this is a great step in trying to curb that behavior of our government. This is a good step by our government in trying to do something about that, just abandon and leave. Apart from, of course, my favorite department, buildings which are now being fixed. And that obviously has rich heritage. So this seems to be expanding throughout the rest of the island now, which I'm happy to say that it is happening. The truth is, Glenderry prisons have been sitting there idle for years, and this could only add to it. I remember, like the honorable member, there are a few of us that would have visited the prisons for legitimate reasons other than incarceration. I remember visiting there as a student, as a medical student, and basically was fascinated by the architecture of the very building. I still remember it, although I haven't been there for several years, almost 30 years now. And it is a site that we need to use. This is the new building, the new prisons have been rebuilt, and it has to be used. Barbados is now wanting for new avenues to market itself, to increase the job market for individuals, to increase the learning areas for our children. To have a museum there is wonderful, but of course it can't only be about the prisons. There are other areas that we can bring in there. I'm thinking about, this leads me basically to what can happen to the rest of the island. And I spoke about some of these issues from my constituency, not issues, ideas I should say. And one of we do have a rich heritage in St. Philip, especially St. Philip North, no offense to my other colleagues. And it begins with, as a child, I remember Sam Lars Castle. As children, we were almost excited that friends and family visit the island, because one of the first places we would go to visit is Sam Lars Castle. And the truth is, St. Philip, especially St. Philip North, we were really hurt by the incident that happened where the building was burnt down. We actually grieved. And I used to enjoy reading the plaques at Sam Lars Castle that told the history of Sam Lars. I used to enjoy hearing my parents relate to our visitors the way he used to, as the merrymen say, hang the lanterns in the coconut trees to steer the ships upon the reeds. These are things that I wish were thought of. I could be incorrect, but I wish were thought of in terms of rebuilding the old quote-unquote Sam Lars Castle, basically to look like what it used to look like. That was one of the most beautiful sights on the island. And tourists enjoyed it. This was what I call part of the tourist belt for St. Philip. And from Sam Lars Castle, I could easily move on to areas like Skeets Bay. I know the honorable member for St. Michael's South has plans for Skeets Bay, hopefully, and I'm excited to hear about them. But this is also an area where it basically fed several families in St. Philip North, Skeets Bay, Bayfield, and several surrounding areas. And it pleases me to see the nostalgia on the members, the old fisher community. When you speak about the market and the stories they have and the history that they have, and they would hate to see that run to ruin, or placed in a position where the history cannot be remembered. There are thoughts with respect to refurbishing the old fish market, which might be difficult because of the actual site. The seas are rough, the jetty has been destroyed. We may have to think about things like restaurant where we can employ people, different areas, but I'm sure the Minister of the Blue Economy may have thoughts and designs on that. I'm thinking visually moving along the coast of St. Philip. When you leave Skeets Bay, you can't help but see the lighthouse. You can even see it from Skeets Bay, the East Point Lighthouse. And before taking on this other job that I have in this house, I was unaware of what they call them, lighthouse, the clubs, the societies, that basically their mission is to preserve lighthouses and to educate people on the history of lighthouses. And I am hoping, early up I had sent in a proposal for it, but I think I saw in the newspapers lately that they're asking for tender. And I am hoping that the idea of a museum remain with the East Point Lighthouse. There's nothing wrong with putting a cafe, it's a picnic site. Let people use it, showcase their talents. These are areas we need to look at with respect to jobs. And I am anxious. It's been sitting there for a little while now. I know it was painted over. It has a history, people living there and how the community operated around it. And I am very anxious to see something happen there with respect to heritage tourism. It is basically time to move out of the box in terms of how we will develop or redevelop the tourism product. I move along the coast. Of course, everybody knows Culpeper Island. I became aware, and I spoke about it before COVID in here, became aware of the slave baths in Fortescue, the history of the cholera burial ground in Tree Houses Park, which I've been unable to find up to this day, but I'm sure it's there. We have to think like that in terms of tourism. Now, I'm seeing ads on television where, exercise programs, treadmill, where they're able to hook up to trails online. Why can't we be a part of that? Why can't we put trails, virtual trails, where you can hike virtually on a treadmill or wherever through Barbados? Some of these areas you meet several people from other countries, and it's probably a thought to make the world aware of what Barbados has to offer. These are things we need to come up with newly. 1 second. Thanks. Right. So we need to think about that, and it can only be helped. And I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources for seeing that the refurbishment or rebuilding or replacing of the roads in St. Philip North has started. The truth is, tourists used to pass through there. When we had a vibrant tourist industry, pass through there on the way to Bastreba, East Coast Road, St. Lucie. And it helps that the roads have been fixed. And I want to lend my personal thank you to the minister and the minister in the ministry. And it gave me permission to mention the Mark Cummins, the PS in the ministry, as well as who I now consider a colleague of mine at NTW, Mr. John Chandler. And they have backed me, they have supported me, and I want to say thank you with respect to that. I want to say thank you also with the ability for us, same ministry, to increase the transportation. Thank you. To make bus transportation easier throughout St. Philip. I still await the general manager who had promised me a route to connect certain parts of St. Philip, rather than having to take 2 buses to get what would be normally a 5-minute walk. I still await that to happen, but tourists do travel on buses. Tourists do use bicycles. That has started to develop in Barbados, where they visit the island on bicycles. And there's no other place better than the country to see that is happening. So I want to thank them for that. And the thing that is on my mind especially, the chattel houses. That is such a part of our history. And the truth is, I hate to see the demise of them. But the thinking now is, the more developed we are, and the more our pockets become full, we move away from the chattel houses and build the big, sometimes monstrosities about the island. There must be a way to preserve the child houses, either by encouraging people, whether it be financially or otherwise, to maintain the child houses with the pretty little gardens in front, or save some areas in Barbados where they could be considered, like everything else, a historical site, and maintain the charter houses. I want to add my voice along with the leader of the opposition. I see there are areas, the children's home, for instance, and you know this, Mr. Speaker, that has started the premise of a halfway house in Sterling. I don't know how far that went. But these children are expected to leave the homes at 18. I left my mother's house at 34 years old. Because then, maybe a little bit before, I was ready to take on the world. How do you expect an 18-year-old child to leave a home and figure out how to run a home, how to pay bills? Sorry for the trembling, I'm a little cold in here. How to pay bills, how to budget, how to do all of this. Glenderry offers, I know as the member said, I'm unaware how big the property is, but we have to start thinking about these things as in, where do our young people go? How do they transition? Even the government industrial school rehab, I am not sure how good a rehab program existed in the then Glenderry and the now Glenderry that people could reintegrate into society. Emergency housing is another thing we saw. Right now, people are still being housed in some departments in NAB, in some other areas in Barbados, up to now, several weeks after the storm. Houses are often burned down without insurance. We need to start thinking about emergency housing for some of these cases. It can be that every time the day after a hurricane or some disaster or fire that we are running around scampering like rats trying to figure out where to put these people. We have to start looking for areas on the island that can assist these people. I am not sure fully the setup of Glenderry, but these are things we have to consider, and these are things that we can work on despite COVID. Despite COVID, we have to start thinking along those lines. And I think we can do it. I think Barbados is in a place now where the truth is we can only get better. I enjoy listening to the speech from Honorable Member for St. Michael South Central. And she's right on many areas. We have to protect our groundwater, but one of the things I want to talk of, and I don't know how related it is, but I will say, the positioning of bathroom facilities around the island. The female and male, of course, bus drivers, but females are unique in the sense that it's a little difficult for us to stand up and do what we need to do. There needs to be a strategic positioning of bathrooms along the island. I speak to female bus drivers, tour operators, people that work for sanitation services, and they are forced to pull over and go in the bush. With the development or the redevelopment of tourism, we have to start thinking about areas along the island where a tourist and a local, more importantly, the local person, can use the bathroom facilities. Right now, bus drivers ask one of the residents in the area to use the bathroom. It's even more difficult for sanitation workers because people tend not to let them in the house, although they're people just like us. So with this all this development, I'm begging that certain areas, yes, we have the parks, but certain other areas be designated for workers like these and for tourists that can maintain. These are opportunities for jobs too. These are areas where we can hire people to maintain, where we can hire people to do the gardening. We can hire people to basically, it will get the working people back on stream. We have been hit hard with respect to employment, and these things come in handy here, as well as the initiative for the resolution for Glenderry. It offers people opportunities to showcase their talents, their culture, their foods. People are still here thinking that a tourist likes to come and visit Kentucky, and what's the new thing that there is, the coffee shop? Starbucks. I have a daughter that's dying to go to Starbucks for whatever reason. But every day you pass there's a long line outside waiting to get into Starbucks. So what is happening with our local fare? I am seeing Oystins pet back up now. Unfortunately, some of them do not follow the COVID guidelines, but it's pepping back now. But we need to let tourists see what we have to offer. Breadfruits are there. There are many dishes that we could come up with. Once upon a time, Pelican Village used to be, I don't know if it still is, I haven't visited in a long time, but the mecca for basketry and crafts and glass blowing. We need to remember that this is a part of our culture and we can do it. So whoever manages to take over Glenderry, and I hope not to see in the newspapers 7 months from now or however long it takes, barring no suitable applications, we will now be seeking overseas to a suitable application for the positions. Let it remain a Barbadian thing. Let us, apart from the company that will run it, let us continue to hire Barbadians in these areas. Sam Lawrence Castle, I have had so many complaints. One of being a part of the building, because obviously the Chinese are helping us one way or the other. But I have complaints from residents who would have loved a job there, who had jobs there but had issues being paid. We need to bear in mind that our people count first and foremost, being helped, of course, by tourism and other projects. But tourism has to take on a new look. Of course, you can't dismiss the old, but it has to take on a new look. We have to come up with better ideas. I saw the minister for, let me do the MP, the member of Parliament for St. George South, speak about the skateboarding, what do you call it, skateboarding rink. These things, what's it? Park, the skateboarding park. These things are becoming big. I'm seeing them in the Olympics. We can feature them as part of our tourism product. Nothing wrong with that, but every time we come up with something new in tourism or heritage site, we need to keep Barbadians in mind. In terms of job, and not only short-term jobs, we have very well-qualified people on the island. And it's a pity to say right now, and you know COVID has a big part of it, I want to offer them more than, not to say it's medial, but I want to see them offered more than just sweeping on the roads. Or, well, the ash is gone now, so call it cleaning the roads. Nothing is wrong with it, but we need to be able to offer some of our people that have been well-trained in the universities, whether it be the West Indies or beyond, a job. I have constituents with degrees, good degrees. I met one yesterday, and she has a degree with foreign relations. I don't even know what it's called, but something with international business and foreign relations. Cannot get a job, and it hurts me, and I'm embarrassed by it to offer her something as a receptionist in the office when she's much better qualified. So we have to bear this in mind with respect to employment. I've said a lot more than I thought I would say. I can't fit in anything else right now, but these are the points. Let the heritage sites expand beyond the city. Include St. John and St. Philip. St. John has many, the churches, the old-time churches. St. Philip has many. The Crane is developing. It's not much of a heritage anymore, but that used to be a big area, the Crane. The fish markets, which I know are being worked on. These are things that make us Barbadian, and we have to see them live on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Christchurch, for St. Michael East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope to be brief, like most. Sir, we are talking about institution which has an ugly history. An institution which is not that wholesome. And in many cases, in most cases, working class black people, even when they're committing nothing more than a minor offense, found themselves in that concentration camp called a prison. It was supposed to be be a correction center, but it was a concentration camp. women could not even keep hair on their heads because people that don't look like us shave the hair off your head. They treat people who were now proclaimed by them as human beings because this institution has a birth in the early second half of the 19th century, when we were, for the first 2 decades or so, being considered as human beings. After the first 2 decades after emancipation, we were considered as human beings. So that's a barbaric institution or enterprise, whatever you choose to call it, to make it sound like it's something of worthy consideration. And many of our people left that institution then, and still up to the time when we were still utilizing it, stigmatized, ostracized, never given the opportunity for reintegration in the society, although we were standing on the principle that if you commit what they consider then a crime, as long as you serve the time, you were supposed to be seen as an ordinary citizen, fully reintegrated back into society. Not even your grandmother, who was a victim of the culture of the time, did not accept you as a human being. You couldn't even get nowhere to stay. They had no institutions, no halfway houses, nothing in Barbados to facilitate those persons. And you know, sir, the caste system stepped in. The Brahmins, black Brahmins and white Brahmins, were allowed to go to prison after robbing banks and robbing other institutions, and their families could still get them out in the imperial lands in the United States of America and Europe. But when our people spend a couple months or weeks in incarceration for whatever reason, even if it is maintenance, you were stigmatized. Nobody trusts you. You couldn't put down your wallet. Even if the priest took up the wallet, the man who went to prison was perceived as the man who stole it. And that has an ugly history. And I hope that the framers and the planners who began to think exclusively of the use of the institution also had a focus on expanding their thoughts beyond the laissez-faire view of materialism and monetary rewards, in thinking about how do we utilize that estate called Glendarie Prison and any lands around it for the good of the people. In other words, I would prefer that the framers, the thinkers, and I don't blame the minister, because I know how this thing works. I had a sojourn in two Barbados Labour Party administrations working in the ministry, and many times I see the document when it is complete, and all I write on the document something is a proof. So I know ministers who make you feel they got enough brain and thing, but the documents are normally draft and forwarded to you, printed, checked by the PS, passed on to you by the secretary, and you sign off, noted, approved. You don't even have to know one more English word and the date on it. So nobody can fool me. Unfortunately, I get an opportunity to peep into how the administration, how governance work in the country. But I'm saying that when it gets here, it is subject. I am glad to be present today to hear people going into a deeper cultural, anthropological assessment of the reality of the use of the land. That is very important because it gives us an understanding of how it impacts on the life of people. not only the transfer of the use of the land through state intervention to the BTI and subsequently being utilized as a museum. But the museum has a lot to do with how we plan to portray our history. I am portraying our history, and I'm very sorry, my sister spoke about Sam Lords and hanging the lands in the tree. Sam Lords was a crook. I'm promoting that. I promoting the positive aspects of our history, because when I want to talk about who we are, I know Sam Lords had nothing to do with me. I don't want to reflect the genius and the achievements of Sam Lords, and I'm not being facetious in any way, but I understand the perspective, because that's how the schools like to teach you these things. You know, George Washington House, a man who had flu or something like that, and he come down here, and I got to be struggling every day. So, but if you like George Washington House, where I can't like George, where I can't like King Jaja House up in 2 by Hill too. Is it a good location in a great constituency? St. Michael's East, up by us, right? But the reality is that we have to be very careful, because I was reading a book recently about students coming out of university doing first and second degrees, and there was a tenet in the arrangement that all of those students had to learn about the great philanthropists. Because you need to give great credibility to these people who extract wealth and now passing back little trinkets and little donations, by the donations to groups. And these groups come around and do a lot of mischief, even to modern governance. And you know the old adage, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So these philanthropists now pushing in their hands and everything, giving people everything, and then they're doing what they do. I hear a lot of discussion. I hear a lot of discussion about what some of the big hotelers and some of the big businesses and Barbados are doing. I am saying that too much emphasis is placed on developers and people who invest. And at the end of the day, these people are only means to help the elevation and the development of our people. These people don't need to be glorified, because their glorifications and the maximum rewards which they receive out of these societies. They don't want no more glorification than that. They don't want you to call them these great saviors. What you have to do is, those people who accumulate wealth over the years, you must be able to utilize that, and if there's anything benevolent about what they're doing, they must be able to inject that in the development of the society, redeem themselves from the acts that they committed, and help to develop the people in our communities. Sir, I know you can't speak, but I know if you were able to do so, you would certainly support my perspective, because it is within your interest. And there's something called Judgment Day. Trust me. We are on the eve of Judgment Day. I have had the unfortunate experience, but obviously that is my role, and you, sir, in recent times, are understanding how much the people in St. Michael's Central and the people in St. Michael's East reach out to us and ask us to focus deeper intentions and concerns about our development as well. And I was pleased to hear some minor extensions of what I consider to be probably the original focus, not by any person directly in these corridors. But the question sometimes is, you know, the society out there believes that governance is exclusively controlled by us. And I said before, on many occasions, when we want to do something well, and we have an ancestral arrangement in which we call cabinet or we call even parliament, that does not allow the participation of the general society to participate in the dialogue, we have a very small perspective of our reality. And our reality needs to be extended to include people's view, because those are the people that sent us here to represent them. All the St. Michael's East can't come in here, but all the St. Michael's East expect me to represent their interests. And that is why we are here. I had almost 1 million people in your presence, and subsequently multiplying the millions descended on you, sir, as the Honorable Speaker, and myself as representative of St. Michael's East, asking what is their future. Born on his own one pocket. Little cosmetic changes like Zone 1 and Zone A and all of that. Technical officers like to play with these things and make you believe that there's something so profound. Like Zone A and then Zone 1, and then they alter the areas, and then they tell you about geology and all of that. All of these things you hear. But the reality is that these people live in Barbados, in St. Michael's East, Licorice Village, Mylor's Hill, in St. Michael's Central, Flint Hall, Goddins Road, Dean's Land, Station Hill, around Bank Hall. These people ask us every day, what are you doing for me as parliamentary representative? I normally get my last say when it comes here. After this, I got to go to the Nation newspaper. And I don't know how freely I am allowed to express views without alteration and twists, especially in the media. But this is the only opportunity that I can go toe-to-toe on the representation of the people in my community. My people in my community, we are not against using Glenderry Prison for some wholesome purpose. No, we are not against it. I believe it is a spiritual cesspool, and therefore it needs cleansing. I was hoping when I heard the leader of the opposition speaking about his visit there that he would have indicated to me that he did a job. He said he did some of that. That he did a job that allowed us to clean the evil that occurred in there, not just popping off the necks of black people's heads, you know. Working class black people. Let me clear myself on the variables. So I know people in here talk a lot about who went to jail, but I want to know all of them that went to jail look just like them. The ones that never went to jail is the ones that ain't look like them. So they don't have to talk about jail, who went to jail, and Glenderry. Don't have to worry about this stigmas or a lot. They get jobs because of family relationships. And they get put to the highest office in the land because of family relationship. Blood. W.E.D. Du Bois, talented 10th approaches to survival. But when you know that you had a young cousin or a brother or a sister who had to face incarceration, face bondage, face all types of criminal inflictions, that sometimes criminals are incriminating innocent and civil people. And that is how this society emerged. This is no heaven. criminal people incarcerate civilized people from the bottom in this society. And I think that when you begin to conceptualize what it is that you want to do, you have to face those realities. And if you're going to use it as a museum, I will expect them to be able to give me a whole long list of all of those people that they pop their necks off, and in many cases not with even any proper trials. And there are many other persons who did injustice to man, that even enslaved men and dehumanized men and got great rewards. They also should be in the museum. They should be in the museum as well. I was hoping, sir, that I would see a museum come out of Drax Hall, honest with you. I believe that land and that soil at Drax Hall is made up of more black working class dead bodies than probably any other place across Barbados. Drax Hall. And I tell you, we're going to dig at Drax Hall for a long, long time. No coming off. No coming off. When you're talking about a museum, we're talking about a museum, and those are lands that if I had to make the kind of anthropological assessment that I believe is required, it is those areas that I would really love to see turn into a museum. Sir, the people in St. Michael's East have been told, and so in St. Michael's Central, that some form of development would occur there in the near future. I take the word of the Prime Minister on that forms of development would occur in the land space, which is an extension of St. Michael's East, but right inside the bowels of St. Michael's Central itself. I am not looking at any hope or any promise that will carry me into 2029. Well, I probably will be a dead man then. I had the fortune or unfortunate of walking my entire community, and when I asked the former late Prime Minister, my brother and my friend, Owen Seymour Arthur, for help for the people of Lake Critch Village and Flint Hall, sir. And I told him that I had people down there that could not get water. The waterworks held on to people's money for 4 and 5 years, deposits, and never gave them water, even through all the COVID that we had. The Waterworks Department would not install water in Liquid Village or My Lord's Hill. Passive appeals, aggressive and militant appeals, nothing. The waterworks would not move. And in many cases, it is not even a minister. It might be the minister not asserting himself the way that he should, because we're talking about a human right. People having a right and access to water. But an officer saying, no, you can't get it. The way they say, give me back my $400, the Water Authority never returned the money. And those people were hearing people talk about washing your hands in the early part of the COVID. You were hearing washing your hands, washing your hair, washing your put on masks. And everything. People could not get water. People cannot get water in the community. And people fighting to prove that their grandparents lived on the land prior to 1973, collecting affidavits from JPs who the waterworks turned their back on. I would not upset even correspondence coming from a JP saying that this person lived, because for them a JP is nobody. As long as the officer got on a bow tie and a long tie, or whatever it's called, a tie, as long as he got on that, he thinks that he is somebody. And he denies the residents the opportunity to even come and make representation on their own behalf. Glengarry Prison, they kept it there. Prisoners rebel. In 2005, prisoners rebel. They're up to the closing of it. We're defecating in buckets and tossing it in a well. They had 2 wells out there. All of this scientific language about the pollution of the water table. If the people then burn it down and then it became not suitable for the purpose that they had it for, they will still be dumping 995 prisoners. We're doing that at Glengarry Prison. And we as engineers, MPs from both political parties, were discussing as academics and understanding our reality. In the meantime, a man cannot even get a pit toilet in my area or in St. Michael's Central area. So we ain't nothing to do. People offering bank loans, you can't get nothing. You can't own land. You can't transfer ownership of land. No. You can't be narrow. You can't be narrow. When you bring in any form of resolution, any bill, whenever you bring in anything to the House of Assembly, there's a necessity for broad, wider, a more expansive approach to your assessment of our true reality. And to see how, even after you apply or execute the policy or the program, how it's going to affect people who are living in the immediate community around us. I have to take into consideration. And you know what a young man said to me? Supported me last election. He said to me, well, he called me minister. That's because he knows I'm highly spiritual. He said, minister, you and the prime minister of the day up to 1998 told me that you were going to put a sewage plant in this community. How many years has passed? How many years elapsed since you told me that? Why should I believe you now? I don't want to tell you, but this is a different prime minister. But you know, he's waiting patiently to see if I'm going to come back with the examination sheet, with my track record. So see, he's the examiner, you know. He's got to determine, sir, if you get a grade C or no grade at all. So we have to be concerned about that. And so as much as we will love to be romantic in the way how we feel about what our government is doing, what the minister that is responsible for bringing it here today is doing. And I said before, I really respect him very much. But he is the messenger. He is the agent, right? But he can't answer all the questions that I am asking today. But somebody has to answer the questions. Because Wednesday last week, 30-something families descended on the place. And they're going to ask about the use of Glengarry Prison too, because I have an institution that is more effective not only at a parochial level, but across Barbados. And if this Glandere, everybody coming to this government, not people like me, not people that look like me, everybody come to this government want to take up the state property. And the government, and if I want Glandere prison for this 11 foundation. Huh? Sound funny? But I want Glandere prison for it too. I am confident I can manage something there. And I have time to do these things, trust me, and energy as well. But sir, 30-something families descended on me, recorded in a book in my office. They want land in the immediate areas surrounding the same prison. And people offering me land in St. Joseph. Somebody wants to send me above the airport. When they know that the people above the airport are going to move to. NHC tell me come for the forms. They send me the forms. I send somebody to NHC to get the forms. And when they get there, all the staff go to a funeral. This is clumbing. This is serious business. In the meantime, I have people waiting for these forms to return to me. Thoughts must be wide. Thoughts must not be directed in a small space and exclude people. Put people first must be the anthem or the theme that must influence what it is that we are doing. Tell me how, sir, not only me, tell me how the people of St. Michael's Central, I saw the system here, unfortunately you can't get up and speak for yourself. I just hope that I'm not saying anything that is embarrassing to you. Tell me how you could express to your people who sent you to Parliament. And I never thought I would have been here, because probably I would have been able to speak publicly about my experiences in Glandere prison too. Not visiting like you as a priest or a reverend, but I would have been an inmate too. Well, I know what it was like to run around, and there are people here within earshot that know it very well. I know what it was growing up in the Ivy and Howard's Crossroad and being called alias Bombess and all kinds of things, and Ruby Blackson and all kinds of things. I grew up here in my lifetime. And while some of these people boast about the relationship, some people want me to believe that I know Wilbert Force. Some people here say that they attribute all the great qualities with the man that, the house that used to belong to Everborough. Some people say that all these great values they achieve as a result of the man that just died. He died? The Queen husband. But say that this man, because of the opportunity to be part of this institution, such positive qualities have been imported, these great attributes which they don't have. Nobody really got the mothers, the fathers, they went to the primary schools in Barbados, done it. So we have a mentality like that, that believe that nobody else in Barbados got sense. And if they can't find something to show you as a criminal, they're trying to show that you're treacherous in one way or the other. And you can, in Barbados, even out of experiences, you could end up in prison for doing nothing because a certain group belongs to a specific class. Believe that you're not worthy. So therefore, you even get brand a criminal, don't mind that you never carry a toothpick. That is where we are. I want help for the people in St. Michael's East. I don't want to hear or see any priority being given to transfer of any prison into a museum, although in principle I might not be against it, and then I have to be forced to make excuses in less than a few months away from a general election. Well, sir, I don't even know which is the general election. If the Lord gives me breath, I don't know if I will be with you or not. Because I walk every day gingerly, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. And nobody will change me. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. There are people in this society that regardless of how hard you prove yourself, these people make individual subjective judgment on whether you're worthy of survival. And I know people that don't like things that are happening but can't talk because they're frightened not only to be gay, but they're frightened that they may not be able to breathe. And I view these things seriously. Then they walk around and tell people, oh, Prescott is so, what is it called? Cantankerous. These pretty words. Cantankerous. So, it's that I don't speak on everything, but when I see things that that are happening, that appears to be retrogressive, not sometimes in the actual doing it, but sometimes there are other things that you must do in advance of it. I have to first, after begging people, and you, sir, begging people, you know, you might not want me to say these things, but after begging people, we all went and begged people. We all went and tell people noble things. And then we can't do anything to help them. It is the most painful thing. If I felt that there's some young interloper that is invading the space in St. Michael's East, he can't, as long as I got breath in my body, I don't even care which institution he has an interest in. It can't happen. If anybody in my house they even tell me they're going to vote for you if they're done, I will put them out. Would not speak to the people at all. Because I'm playing them games. Nobody imposing nothing in St. Michael's East as long as people put me to be parliamentary.
I remember.
You know
you get latitude.
Yes, sir.
But you know what? It's COVID.
Yes, sir.
So helicopters ain't landing sometimes.
Yes, sir. But I also was trying to speak for me and for you.
That is understood.
Sir. But sir, so I was hoping that the system would be so just that it will understand, since I'm speaking on the behalf of St. Michael's East and St. Michael's Central. And I'm hearing other voices saying that you're also speaking on behalf of us in St. Michael's West.
If you can show me the standing order that allows you to so do, to speak and multiply your 30 minutes, I'd be most grateful, sir. I remember. If you can point to the standing order that circumscribes everything and gives you the latitude to speak for 30 plus 30 plus 30, I'd be most grateful.
But sir, I believe that you have some latitude in being flexible.
I'm speaking to the standing orders, honorable member.
I know, I'll wrap it up, sir. But sir, I just would like to see whatever is decided here today. Sir, I would like to see at least some form of action. Because in St. Michael's East and St. Michael's Central, because we breached the arrangements before, not this present BLP regime, but we breached the arrangements before. And we have to be able to allow those people to feel a sense of trust. in us as parliamentary representatives by doing something. Look, give me some utility services, man. You're ready to do it, I got people without water. You don't have enough money accumulated, whether you're getting them from the slot machines or wherever you're getting them from. Give me some water. Nothing stop the waterworks from coming in and running some pipe down there, sir. Nothing asks the committee that is responsible for the restrictions but from coming publicly and not any indoor discussion and saying, look, Barbados, Light and Power, give the people some electricity in the area. Let them enjoy these things. These people are 40, 50, 60, and got children. And if you wait it to 20 years from now, paying taxes, VAT. You can't get away from paying the tax, you're paying VAT. You don't believe that this is time for a discussion at the level, highest levels of the public service, along with the ministers responsible, and at least begin to give the people some benefits as a result of the way how we perceive development should occur. It is about a perception of development. And I personally believe, based on all the tenets I see inside the manifesto of the Barbados Labour Party, the philosophical principle, the covenant of hope, and all these things, I believe that this is a government that must put its hands where its mouth, its head, where its mouth, and the writings in the covenant and the manifesto is indicating that we intend to go. And we have to do it. And we have to do it, and we talk a lot, not only during this term, but prior to that, about the inclusive nature of the government itself. And inclusive does not mean a closed shop inclusion, where only the members who become members of parliament, but I believe inclusion means that people of all different social types must become part of this society, and they must be a mirror of who we are. I normally like to say, man, know thyself. But we have now a new mantra. We say, we must know who we are. And I'm just asking for that kind of approach be applied, and I will give my full support to the use of the Glandary prison, which I will never glorify, right, as a museum. Thank you very much, sir.
Honourable St. John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for all of my life, I believe that I was walking in Gideon boots. More so now, in this political journey, I'm convinced that I'm walking in Gideon boots. The honorable member for St. Michael East, I believe, Mr. Speaker, he too is walking in Gideon boots, but his is a little more strident than mine. I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to support this particular resolution because this initiative was birthed while I was at the said Ministry of Housing and Lands. And I believe that the initiative of repurposing a lot of the buildings across this country that are now languishing is a good initiative. I want also, Mr. Speaker, to ask the honorable member to look not only in urban Barbados, but to look in rural Barbados as it relates to those properties that can be repurposed. And before I identify such, I want to offer blessings on all of the constituents of St. John and take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to ask them to stay safe in this COVID environment and to do whatever is necessary to protect self and family. But I have a property at Gore Hill, the old polyclinic, that I believe can be repurposed to provide a similar type of project as Glenderry, maybe not as big as Glenderry, but I believe that we can provide employment at that particular location if the old polyclinic is transformed into a vendor's mall. And I will be agitating for that particular location to be transformed as well under this particular rejuvenation project. Because I believe that community development is not only triggered from those who reside in the particular community, but it can also come from initiatives like this one from government as it relates to the Glenderry complex. Now, I too would have made visits, Mr. Speaker, to that particular location when I was engaged in Project Oasis. And I saw a room full of youngsters that were from 19 to 29 at that institution. And I believe that if we're using the facility, Mr. Speaker, for a purpose of national benefit, that individuals, maybe like some of those particular young men who were in the facility, can be used to maintain the property and the environs of that particular property. Mr. Speaker, I want to speak directly to the Honorable Member for St. Michael East to allay some fears that he mentioned just now as it relates to his constituency and yours, and also the Honorable Member for St. George South. Because the Barbados Water Authority, Mr. Speaker, we are managing several priority projects all at once. It is exceedingly demanding, but we're managing those projects all at once. Vineyard is right at the finish line as I speak to you today, Mr. Speaker, and we're moving on to other projects that are treated or deemed to be priority in this country. I mentioned walking in Gideon boots, Mr. Speaker. The father gave Gideon 300. He gave the Barbados Labour Party 30. And in a similar vein to the mass that we knew from the former member for St. Lucie, 29 is working just as strong as 300. But Mr. Speaker, what is happening at Bellevue, and Bailey Alley? And this is not dissimilar to what took place in my constituency as it relates to that land at Bath. And when I mentioned the Gideon experience, Mr. Speaker, I'm mentioning that because I was selected from the poor to represent that same demographic in this August chamber. So when persons had difficulties with government regularizing those constituents of mine at Bath and Welch, I feel the pain of the Honourable Member for St. Michael East. I'm feeling your pain, Mr. Speaker, and I'm feeling the pain of the Honourable Member for St. George South. And we have done St. George North, sorry. So we have done the necessary work. I have been to the location. I've done site visits at the Bell with the technical staff of the Barbados Water Authority, simply to try to find a solution and resolution to the residents that the Honourable Member would have mentioned. And we have sent out requests for proposal as it relates to finding solutions for that particular locale. And we believe that that particular solution, Mr. Speaker, can be replicated in your constituency as well as the Honourable Member for St. George North in Bailey Alley. It is now a priority project of the ministry, Mr. Speaker. And one of the things that, like I said, we have done, we have conducted a site visit, we have sent out the RFP, and it is expected that early next month, those particular requests for proposal will be looked at, and a decision will be made for a design-built service sewage treatment plant within that particular locale. Mr. Speaker, it will entail the installation of individual communal septic tanks with filter technology, and this was recommended by the Environmental Protection Department. So, yes, it would have taken some time to reach this particular stage as it relates to the solution. In terms of the timeline, Mr. Speaker, the submission and the approval for the final design is expected to take 12 weeks. The construction, installation, and testing is expected to take 46 weeks. But we're on that particular road as it relates to resolution for those persons in the Bell, Bellevue, and Bailey Alley. So, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, I understand that as MPs, as reps for the particular areas, that we must come to this particular location and agitate for change, and agitate for persons within the constituency that don't have a voice, that we're providing that voice. And hence my analogy to the Gideon situation as it relates to me, Mr. Speaker, because I am from the poor, representing predominantly poor in the constituency of St. John, similar to the honorable member for St. Michael East. So I hear your voice, member, and I understand the pressure that you will be facing from persons who require and request resolution yesterday as opposed to today or tomorrow. And I can assure you that the ministry, through the Barbados Water Authority and their technical people, are working assiduously to bring the solution as fast as possible to those locations that are impacted. Because yes, similar to those persons in the constituency of St. John that we're regularizing in Bath, they must have that property currency that all of us aspire to have. And I, like I said, would not come here and not offer you the information that we have as it relates to treating this project with priority. And that is coming from the absolute top. It is coming from Cabinet, that this is a situation that must be remedied. This is a situation that must be rectified soonest as it relates to having those people live with a certain level of dignity. So I respect what you're saying. Mr. Speaker, I said that I would be brief, but that is my attempt to offer what is happening in relation to that. We would have had the town hall meetings as it relates to the water zoning on February 9th, 14th, 9th, 11th, and 14th of February, and the compilation of the information is at the final stages to make the necessary changes that your constituents like mine can have waterborne facilities. So plans are in train. Plans are at an advanced stage as it relates to what is happening within the ministry to bring a solution to the problem of the Bell, Bellevue, Chapman Lane, and Bailey Alley. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really am happy for the opportunity to speak on this particular matter. Like some of the other honorable members, I too have mixed feelings where this is concerned, but I think that we should begin to focus a little bit more on the major thing, which is the reuse of the building and of government buildings in particular. For too long, a lot of our infrastructure has been left to deteriorate, as some members would have mentioned before. All sorts of unsightly things they have become over the years. And I think that being able to take this particular part of our history, and I've listened very carefully to people talking about heritage and these sort of things, but I have a slightly different perspective on it in terms of how we see it being used, because I've heard a number of the members saying that it is specifically going to be used as a heritage thing for tourism. Now, that didn't necessarily come across to me. I don't know if where that particular information came from, but what I do know is that it is being put out there through a tourism body in seeking persons who with ideas to use it. And I think this gives the communities, the very communities that we're talking about, a great opportunity to put themselves together if it means forming cooperatives, if it means linking with other members of the society, the creatives, whoever else, and being the ones who go after this particular property to do whatever it is that they may. I think oftentimes one of the things that plagues us as people in this country is that we sit back and allow others from outside to come and be the ones with all of the ideas, whilst we will sit down and oftentimes end up just complaining. And I believe the time has come when we, and I'm going to say it loud and clear, as black people must break the shackles that have been on us for so long, that stops us from being able to unite and come together and form businesses and take and make use of the opportunities that present themselves when things like this arise. And I will be in the forefront of being there to encourage people, not only just persons who we consider to be in the creative industries or whatever, but any other person, whoever it is, only $2 that you got to put into a pool or whatever it is, to get involved. Because I am certainly not going to be a person who is going to sit down and watch my children, and hopefully if I live long enough to get some grandchildren, have to go through the same thing from one generation to the next. This is a perfect opportunity for us as people, as Barbadians, to get in, form, like I said before, whatever businesses we need to form, whatever it is we need to do. I heard one honorable member say that the credit union is liquid and they're seeking to do things. Well then, if you're telling me, as they say all the time, that the credit union has been a vehicle for poor people to move themselves to another level, well, let them show me in my lifetime that this is what it really is about, for real. And it's not just talk. So that I am challenging people, and I'm challenging the credit union and everybody to find a way that we can meet each other where we are supposed to meet in order to make sure that ordinary, in fact, sorry, I don't call them boy ordinary people, because everybody here ordinary. You got ordinary people all about. That the average person out there like myself who wants to invest and wants to be a part and parcel of the economic activity in this country has a legitimate chance to do so. If there is something that I don't know about that is in the air that will stop people from being able to do that, then somebody with a little bit more knowledge than myself should tell me so that I can sit there and keep quiet. But it is important at this juncture, especially when at a time like now, this market would be a buyer's market. And to me, this is an opportunity that I would love to see, if it means that the Honorable Minister responsible for the growth of the prize fund and fund access and all of these other things be able to say, this is a project that is happening, and we have persons within our communities, within our constituencies who can come together and put forward some sort of ideas and whatever that they will be able to say, well, okay, we can finance this too, we can help in some way. We might not be able to do all, but we might be able to put something towards it, because that is what government is supposed to do. It is supposed to empower people. It is so, you know, I smile sometimes when I come in here. I like to listen. You know, I talk much. I like to listen. And I hear these conversations over and over and over and about empowering people and all this stuff. We also got to educate them too. And not just formal education in terms of go and get a degree and get a job and go and work for somebody, or go and teach and push your chest up in the air and tell you, oh, where you know everything about everything. That don't put food on the table. And it does not pass on generational wealth to nobody. Because one of the problems that we have, and I think one of the members started to talk about it, but if you can show me how many of our families that you can see where generation after generation have either progressed or have maintained a particular lifestyle or whatever else it is, or who have been entrepreneurs and continue where their grandfathers or great-grandfathers or great-great-grandfather or mother would have started. We'd be hard-pressed. Within our communities, we'd be hard-pressed to find it. And every time that things come up like these here, people tell me, oh, it's tourism. But your first persons that you have to empower are your people. And every time we talk tourism, we seem to think that it's only people from outside who could come and get involved. But I remember as a child and as a young person, I know most people in here will remember, there was a slogan that said, tourism is our business, let's play our part. And I'm saying to this chamber and to those who are watching, take the slogan for what it is and use it now. Let this be the opportunity for people in Barbados, if you gotta get thousands of them, to be able to come together and make this our business and find use for that space. As I said before, there are too many occasions where we have allowed opportunities to pass, and then we sit in the background and complain or grumble. That is not going to get us anywhere. That is not going to move any family from station 1 to station 2 to station 3. It is about action. It's about what are we prepared to do. And the opportunity is there for everyone. Now, for the people living in the area, I believe that once you can put them together, they should have first option. I can't see anything that could be wrong with that. But we have to be able to get into the communities and talk to people and arm them with the information, give them the tools that they need to get involved in these things. Give them the skill that is needed to get involved in these things. And it's not just only with Glenderry Prison as a thing, but for any other opportunities that present themselves across the country. And so I feel that as a matter of principle, that we have a obligation to not only view this in one light or in a small way, but to see this as being part and parcel of that transformation that we keep talking about. This gives us the opportunity to get involved at all levels of it, to transform people's lives. I can see clearly so many different opportunities to make use of that building that many entrepreneurs can benefit from, that the people within the environs would be proud to be a part of, that they themselves can benefit from it. But the conversation cannot be that it's only about or that is limited to a particular thing, like a museum or whatever it is that you see it as. I get worried with these kind of things. I have lived long enough to see in 2000 and where was it? When planes went in? That was 2001? 2001? 9/11 was in 2001? Right. Two planes crashed in New York City, and people stopped coming to Barbados. I have lived to see a 2008 financial crash, and people stopped traveling too. And so I get a little bit concerned when the conversation about our economic ability to do things is always centered around this whole idea of, we got to get people to come from somewhere else to walk through and spend money in order for you to earn, or in order for you to build up something. You got to think beyond that. And so I really just wanted to put that on the table, that let us not keep ourselves in a box that says this is what it is, because I've never heard anyone or haven't seen anything that suggests that this is the only thing that can happen with Glengarry. What I do know is that it is being put in a position and led by tourism people in terms of the investment or handling of it. And so I just wanted really at this time, Mr. Speaker, to put that on the table, because I see this as, again, a great opportunity for our people to come together. And as I said before, and I got to repeat it, if you're saying to me that the credit unions are saying that they are liquid and they have monies to lend and these kind of things, let us see if we can, at some form, shape, or fashion, encourage people within the communities to form the cooperatives, to form the businesses, whatever it is that they need to do, and put themselves in a position where they can be part and parcel of what economic advantages that can be gained from being involved with this building. And I'm going to stress it again, not only with this building, but I'm sure that as time goes on, there will be others that will come onto the marketplace. There are other opportunities that I want people to begin to think that they have not only the right to be involved also, but they have the capacity to do it. But I think oftentimes we speak as if we who live on this island don't have the capacity to do anything other than let somebody else invest and then hope to get a job. It can't be that. It has to move beyond that. And I think our conversation to people must be going in a different direction, in one that says to you, you have the capacity to do it. There's liquidity in these places. Put yourselves together and put yourselves in a position where you can make an effort to be involved in these things. Now, I heard others talk about some of the other things that need to be done, and I'm privileged. I'm very happy to hear the representative for St. John talk about the things that they're undertaking, which is going to make life a lot easier for those people within the area. But we also have to be realistic when we're dealing with these things. You know, I would like to be able to be the person who had a magic wand, who could do abracadabra, and everything that needs to be done in Barbados gets done, boom, one time. But it's not realistic. It don't ever happen in Hollywood. So there are steps within which things have to be done. And sometimes it may not be as fast as people like. But I think that once you put, the longest journey starts with the first step. And I believe in this case, the first step, for me personally, which would be, again, transformational and empowering, is for the conversation to start that says to the people within the environs that you too have an opportunity here to get involved in this. And not that it is, when we say it's coming through tourism, that automatically the brain shuts down and says, okay, this is for somebody from outside because it's tourism. No. And I think that once we begin to change that particular conversation, and we begin to solicit the ideas of people within the environs, and you start to explain to them all of the other things that can happen, or the other things that are going to happen, or the things that are even happening right now, to ensure that all the other problems are sorted out as we move forward with this. I think you will get the kind of buy-in that you need. I think, as I heard the member talk about all the questions and the other things that people are asking, then we have the opportunity to answer those questions and to give them the information so that this project becomes one that generations of Barbadians could be proud of, because actually Barbadians themselves got involved and were part and parcel of it. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you. I just wanted to make that very short intervention, because I didn't want the conversation today to be kind of skewed towards one way, which is easy for it to do, which says that once we say a tourism investment, that this means that it has to be persons from outside of Barbados. I thank you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I move to wrap up this debate, first let me thank all honourable members who spoke with full support by all members, and I significantly and sincerely appreciate that. Just to add a few comments. Firstly, a lot of people said that they didn't know the size of the area. It's actually 22.9 acres. So quite a large facility that can be put to extremely good use. What is also important, Mr. Speaker, to note is this facility burnt in 2005, and for those that lost decade with the last administration, nothing, absolutely nothing was done for that facility. And I am happy to be associated with now this new administration taking the forefront and giving an opportunity to put this facility back into productive use. Members also spoke about housing, and I could not finish this debate without speaking a little bit about housing as well. But first, when I heard the member for St. Philip North said that the age that she left her mother's house was in, I think she said 34. It reminded me, I left my parents' house at 18. And my father put me on a plane and said, see you in 5 years. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way, because the next year my grandmother passed away and I had to come back to give her eulogy, actually. And people leave home at different times. And people find their feet in the world for different reasons. It reminds me sometimes, there are some people that when they were teaching you to swim, they would put you on a boat or put you on a jetty and throw you and say, okay, start swimming. And there would be others that would hold you and support you as you learned to swim. And I think it varies depending on the personality, depending on person's ability, and depending on how that person responds to various interactions. But there's absolutely no question at all that we have a tremendous duty and responsibility to be able to satisfy the housing needs of the people of this country. And the Ministry of Housing has endeavored to do that on multiple levels. And we've done that through a vehicle called HOPE. We would have launched HOPE Direct, and that has moving very smoothly, starting at Lancaster. We then moved to HOPE, and Lancaster's 186 houses, and we're about to do shortly at Colleton. My honourable member for St. Lucie tells me it's supposed to be called Fustic now, and not Colleton, I'm hearing. From there, we went to HOPE Premium, starting at Charnox, and we have another one, hopefully we'll be launching at Lower Burney as well, to be able to give people of this country opportunities to be housed, to be able to do what we call density reduction, especially in many of the estates as well. And Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Prime Minister has often said that we're doing a silent housing revolution. And that is because we have another leg, the third leg of the HOPE program to launch. And it's a bit of a teaser because I haven't launched it yet, but when I launch that final leg, which I am tempted to say what the name is, but I will hold it for the launch, it will be revolutionary to be able to give even those making between $1,000 and $2,000 a chance and access to housing in this country. And this is something that has consumed the ministry, and it's something that we work on every day, and I'm very, very close to launching and making it a reality for many, many people in this country. So we have a bright future. We have challenging times, but we have to face our future, and we have to embrace new technologies and new ways of doing business. But at the end of the day, we must always and constantly recognize that we must work every day to take this country forward, even if by 1 inch. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged and ask that this resolution do now pass.
The question is that this resolution do now pass. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 2:30 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended until 2:15 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 2:15 p.m.